America's favorite video series, don't fact check this, is now a podcast. In Collaborative Corner, Dr. Mark Blumenstein breaks down important issues in collaborative eye care. Listen to each new episode starting in January as he reviews the optometrist's role in managing a patient's eye care journey. Tune in through your preferred podcast player.
As much as we've learned about ocular surface disease, there is still so much yet to be discovered. The good news is, this creates a world of opportunity for eye care providers.
The goal of this podcast is to better understand this chronic and complex condition and keep you up to date on the advances being made in its diagnosis and treatment. So let's get to the point. Welcome to another episode of the To The Point podcast. My name is Jackie Garlich, and I'm joined by my co-host, Jessilin Quint. Hello, Jessilin.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good. How are you? What's happening?
Good. Surviving kitchen renovation, but thank you to all of our listeners. I feel like I've been on the road lecturing and I've met so many people that listen to the podcast. So thank you so much for listening. It's always so fun.
Well, we also have a great podcast tonight and a topic that I don't think we've touched on very much in the podcast. And I think it's a really common question. And Jessilin, when you and I were lecturing at Academy, I had people come up to me to ask me about autologous serum drops after the lecture. And so I think there's a lot of questions about it. So tell us about who we're going to be talking to, the expert on this tonight.
Yes, we have a very special guest with us, Dr. Alfonso Sabater, who is a world-renowned surgeon scientist, a pioneer in ocular innovation. He's currently at Bascom Palmer, where he's an associate professor of clinical ophthalmology. He's the medical director of the Ocular Surface Program and the director of the Corneal Innovation Lab at Bascom. He's also the chief vision officer of OcuBio. He's done extensive research focused on corneal and ocular surface protection and regeneration. He has a medical degree and a PhD from various universities in Spain. We could spend probably a full day going over his extensive publications and professional achievements, but he's been, published in so many leading journals. He has multiple patents. He is a reviewer for different scientific journals. He's co-founded multiple different spin-off companies from the University of Miami that are focused on developing therapies and devices for patients. So thank you so much for being here. We are so excited to have you.
Thank you so much, Jackie and Jesse, for this opportunity. It's great to be here with you.
Do you ever take a nap? Like, do you take breaks? Like this, you're a busy guy. Oh my gosh.
Of course, that it's mandatory in Spain, right?
Oh my gosh, I'm so impressed by this. I mean, this is I'm so happy you're here because I really do want to pick your brain on serum tears and just talk more about that. So, can you start us out because you're the founder of this company. So, tell us like why you founded OcuBio, like what it is. Give us a little intro.
Yeah, of course. So, well, OcuBio is really a clinician scientist-driven company. And we're really focused on disruptive science. So we strongly believe in personalized medicine. And for that reason, we're actually developing a portfolio of assets in both diagnostic and therapeutic space. The qualified autologous serum eye drops that we will be talking about today, it's definitely our first product or service in the commercial space. But OcuBio is more than that. So it's really a spin-off company from Bascom Palmer Institute and the University of Miami. And I have to say that it's not only me, but thanks to the vision of my partners and co-founders, Dr. Victor Perez, who is my mentor and a top clinician scientist at Bascom Palmer, but also Francisco Ballester and David Murray, which are the other two co-founders, and both are highly experienced executive in the pharma space. And so I think we have a very well-rounded team to actually make this happen. But yeah, this is basically OcuBio.
Well, and Bascom's reputation, right? I mean, I feel like if you just say a spinoff from Bascom, like that alone, almost brings this credibility to it just because of the vast of world renownedness of what that institute means and what it's done for patients. So walk us through the serum tiers at OcuBio. Like, maybe for somebody who doesn't really have much knowledge base of like what is it? How's it different than other serum tiers that are on the market?
I mean, most people have heard really about autologous serum eye drops in a very generic way, right? So you draw the patient's blood, spin it down, dilute the serum, and then you put it into bottles, and that's kind of like the traditional model, and it can work, and but it tends to be highly variable from place to place. So when we launched these qualified autologous serum eye drops, we mean something much more structured and controlled. So it's still the patient's own serum, but it goes through these like fully standardized and validated process. So what this means, and a few very concrete things are: number one, that the product is fully standardized, starting at blood collection. We basically validated very specific parameters such as centrifugation speeds, angles of rotation, clotting times, shipping times. So many variables that actually take place during production that sometimes are not really people are not able to control, right, in some settings. Also, manufacturing is done using a proprietary closed system, and we do the manufacturing in an FDA registered blood center. So that's something that we think it's important. It's another item that we feel is very important is that we use preservative-free vials designed to help prevent contamination during use. Definitely, these vials are way more expensive than standard dropper bottles, but we feel that for a product like this, it's something that it's definitely a must. And finally, also the product goes through a series of checks, ultrafiltration, high sensitivity microbiology testing that we do on every single batch. So it's not just one thing; it's really a tightly controlled program. So that I think that's the core. But another aspect that I think it's very important and that can kind of like differentiates qualified autologous serum hydrops from other serum autologous serum hydrops is that we've put a lot of effort into validating how these drops behave at room temperature over defined periods of use. So contrary to what people might think, we didn't start that work just for convenience because we wanted to make serum hydrops more convenient for patients, which of course we want, but we did it because actually from a biological perspective, um, we know that many of the proteins and growth factors actually tend to function best closer to physiological temperatures, not ice cold. So if you think about it, when, for example, we grow cells in culture, we never put the serum cold in the culture plate. We actually warm it up first to 37 degrees before we can put it into the cells. So that's how these started. And then, I mean, we're now in the process of submitting the first publication where we have looked really at the molecular, in vitro, and in vivo behavior of these qualified drops. And even though I can't disclose the specific data yet before it's peer reviewed, but we've seen some very interesting results that really support this qualified standardized approach. So yes, the qualification and the ability for the patients to use it at room temperature, it's convenient, but there is a reason behind that, and it's not just conveniency.
One question on this. So honestly, this refrigeration issue is a big one for my patients. So I actually last week had a patient who was like, "Oh, I'm traveling to London. How should I get these drops to London?" And I'm like, "Oh God, yeah, this is like more of a deal, to have to deal with the refrigeration issue." So I'm hearing the points that like qualified is that there's all these specific metrics and ways to do things that are all standardized in the way that you create these serum tiers. And in doing so, does that make the product work better? Like are the the proteins and everything in a serum tier better preserved and more highly functional if you've got the standardized approach as opposed to what I'm doing now with serum tiers and using a different service?
Yeah, I mean, I generally don't like to basically make conclusions based on personal observations or just other colleagues' observations. I think we have to really look into the data scientifically. But if you ask me about what's my thought about this, well, from the data that we collected, as I said, on in vitro studies, molecular studies, and also in vivo studies, we can say that it's definitely not less effective than when the product is used refrigerated. And in some situations, can even be like more powerful than a refrigerated version. But as I said, that it's part of this study that will go under peer review, and hopefully we'll have more solid data soon. And then from my perspective as a physician, or even some colleagues that have been using the product, what I've heard is that yes, apparently some patients that were okay or doing okay with the standard serum eye drops, when they switch to these qualified autologous serum eye drops, they actually notice a difference. So there is a higher rate of responders. But again, that hasn't been really studied in a retrospective way or perspective way. It's just basically comments that I'm just getting from some providers and my personal experience since I started using the product.
So, thinking about clinically, and using this clinically with patients, what sort of patients would be a good candidate for this type of serum tier, or conditions that you would recommend, or clinical signs? How can we, like, if you were to educate some of our peers on that, what would you say?
Well, it's interesting. If you look at the data out there in terms of like statistics, I was shocked when I saw this, but about 87% of the patients are basically not happy with their current treatment. That's a very high number. And I think we all agree that we have a lot of treatments in the space, but none of them is like great. So I think in simple terms, like any dry patient who is not satisfied with their current treatment is someone that at least I want to think about potentially treating them with qualified autologous steroid drops. I don't think this is the first therapy that we give to dry patients. I mean, I think we should start with high quality conventional care that it's FDA approved and that it's available. But I don't think that this should be the last option to consider. And I think what we're seeing now is that now that we have this more standardized and easier way to obtain product, I think many providers are moving qualified total serum eye drops a little bit earlier in their treatment algorithm. Also, I think another factor that has helped is that autologous serum eye drops now have been, as you know, included in the TIFOS U3 report as an evidence-based ocular surface regenerator, and I think that also has helped many doctors feel more comfortable introducing the product sooner than later. But if I had to be my three top indications, I would say the first indication would be that one. So dry patients who remain symptomatic despite good standard care, basically are not happy with the treatment. The second type of patients, I would say, are patients with neurotrophic keratopathy. So especially stage one patients, but even stage two patients after completing their maybe NGF therapy, where you're looking more for a maintenance strategy. I think it's a good patient. And number three, patients that are using glaucoma medications and they have or they experience ocular surface toxicity. In my experience, this group can really respond very well when you give the surface that extra biologic support. So I think again, I don't think qualified autologous serum eye drops are like the first enough therapy, but I don't think they should be the last. And it's an evidence-based, I think, advanced option that many patients really can benefit from.
I think that there's a lot of interest from the patient side on autologous serum. I mean, I had a patient that said, I really want something She didn't want anything pharmaceutical. She wanted something more natural. And I thought, oh, yeah, of course. I generally don't reach for this first. That is sort of my philosophy as well. But I do think that there are a lot of patients that could benefit from it. If what I do feel like there's some variability on is even the dosing among providers. Like, how often will you dose autologous serum? What percentage will you use? Do you have recommendations or suggestions that you have found clinically, work well for you and your patients?
Yeah, of course. So usually for dry patients that where we're starting the treatment, I generally start at 20%. And the reason why is because number one is less blood that you need to draw from the patient. And number two, because most of the times actually patients do very well on 20%. So that's one of the reasons. And also because if 20% is not enough, still we have a plan B where we can actually increase the concentration. And there are some studies showing that 50% can be superior to 20% in some situations. So one of the things that I want to mention actually is that I think this is also a difference when you compare Occupy with other companies is Occupy doesn't charge more for the 50% concentration than the 20%. So that shouldn't drive the decision. The decision is really whatever is best for the patient. But that would be for dry patients. For neurotropic keratopathy, I usually start at 50% because I think these patients need a higher concentration of factors. And specifically, these are patients that I think respond better to the 50%. But at some point, if they're stable, I think it's okay to switch them to the 20%. And I would say the same thing with glaucoma patients. Usually I like to start them at 50% because many of them, and we've published some studies on that, many of the glaucoma patients that experience ocular surface toxicity, also they have kind of like a level of neurotrophic keratopathy. So that's why I feel that the 50% to start is a good option and then switch to 20%. But on the dry population, I generally start at 20%. In terms of how many times a day, this is interesting. Years ago, when I started basically prescribing autologous serum eye drops, I remember that I used to prescribe it super often, like 6 times a day, every hour, thinking that actually it would be best. And that's something that we also wanted to test in the lab when we started developing the qualified autologous serum eye drops. So basically, how often would be, the ideal, right? Posology. And we actually found that if you go very high in your posology, actually that ends up delaying cellular growth. So sometimes not giving it more times is actually better. So we found that a range between like 3-4 times a day is usually good enough for most patients. So that's what I usually do. I usually recommend it 3-4 times a day.
That is good. I also feel like less dosing for our patients is, they're more likely to be compliant. When you say every hour, yeah, compliance kind of goes out the window at that point. But
Plus, it's a
wonder-
chronic therapy, so it's really
Yeah.
hard to ask a patient to put drops every hour. Yeah, for a
that's
long time.
true. As far as, kind of how long from when a patient starts using it, can we expect to see results or see some improvement? And, this is a chronic therapy. So, what does patient education look like around that? And then also, like, are there any contraindications? Like, are there any patients that this should be avoided possibly?
I always frame these as really as a conditioning therapy, not really like a quick fix. You're trying to restore and support the surface over time, and on top of that, each patient's blood is different, so we don't expect like instant identical results on every patient. I think in real life, most patients start feeling some difference within a couple weeks, 2-3 weeks, but I think we often see the maximum improvement around 2-3 months on therapy. It's a gradual process. So some patients respond faster, some slower. And then on the contraindication side, because we're using the patient's own blood, we worry most about conditions that can affect the quality of the blood. So things like, for example, septicemia or bone marrow failure, or patients with serious liver or kidney disease, where the composition of the serum may actually be abnormal. Those are situations where we may decide that this is really not appropriate for them. Um, However, I have to say that at OcuBio, we're also working on that problem. So actually, this was thanks to the support of the U.S. Department of Defense. Years ago, we started working on an allogeneic version of platelet lysate-based therapy. And this is a product that is currently being evaluated in a phase 1 clinical trial. We're actually about to finalize the study very soon. And while we can't share details yet, the results are so far very exciting. So the whole idea is to eventually have an option for every patient, so that we don't have to just leave some of them behind just because their own blood isn't like suitable. So that's something that we're working on.
So if we want to use, qualified autologous serum drops, how can we get started with that? And can you tell a little bit about what the doctor should educate the patient on the non-refrigeration aspect of this? Seems more foreign to me, to not have it refrigerated or frozen autologous serum. So what would you say to like a doctor that's wanting to actually get started with this, the sort of roundup?
Yeah, I mean, from a logistics perspective, we've tried to make this super simple. We don't want to make it more complicated than what it already is. So if the doctor is interested in prescribing this product, they can just go to ocubio.com. There they can register as a provider. It's quick. They can also add their clinical coordinators, so they can also help with the prescriptions, with the logistics. And once they're registered, I mean, it honestly takes less than a minute to submit a prescription. And in addition to that, we also have a really great customer service team. They have more than 50 years of experience, 15 years of experience in the dry eye space. So they're really here, therefore, to support both providers and patients on anything that has to do with onboarding, questions about the process, and all of that. In terms of educating the patients about the refrigeration concept, um, well, number one, I want to clarify, it's not that the product doesn't need refrigeration at all. So the product has to be stored frozen. And when the patient thaws the bottle, they can use the bottle at room temperature for up to 7 days. We have validated longer storage times at room temperature, but for safety purposes, we don't want to be on those 7 days. And we understand that this is a disruption, especially for patients that have been using autologous serum eye drops, because that's all what we've been telling them. You have to keep this refrigerated all the time. And now you go back and you say, well, and now you don't have to refrigerate it. And they're like, many of them don't understand. And actually, they don't, sometimes they don't feel like confident. They're like, are you sure? So so yeah, sometimes it takes a little bit of time to explain it, but yeah, that's how it works. And yeah, when I explain to the patients and they understand that this has been like, again, validated, qualified, it's very well standardized, they feel comfortable, and of course they like the idea with the fact that they don't have to carry their cooler uh, everywhere.
So thinking of logistics, so let's say a doctor goes to OcuBio, signs up, gets their clinical directors all lined up. They write a prescription, they do the dosing, they verify the concentration, and then does somebody fly out to the location to draw a patient's blood? What's like cost? What's turnaround time from when the blood is drawn to when the patient gets the drops? And then do the drops ever expire?
Yeah, great questions. So and many questions. So
That was a lot. I know.
so to begin with, in terms of the logistics, it's very simple. So after the provider has, or the doctor has really entered the prescription, our team will contact the patient right away through phone call, text messaging, email, to let them know that the provider has basically sent a prescription for them. Once the patient goes online and reviews the information about the product, the prescription, it confirms the subscription, then we will send the patient a blood collection kit to their home. And the patient has two options: can either go to any Quest facility around the country, or they can also request mobile phlebotomy service that it's also provided by a Quest company called Exam One. And the reason why we're working with Quest and Exam One, it's for two reasons. Number one, because they're basically everywhere. And number two, because we actually partnered with them from the beginning. It took us a few months to go through all the process, but we actually train their whole team around the country on how to do the initial processing steps for qualified serum eye drops. And all of them use basically the same parameters of processing. So that's why sometimes doctors ask, well, if I have a phlebotomist in my practice, can they do it? So we do not recommend that because we don't know what's the type of centrifuge they have. We don't know about the protocol that they use. So anyway, there are a lot of variables there. Definitely, this is not a simple process, right? There is blood draw, lab work, bottles, shipping. There are a lot of components involved here, but really at Ocubio, we wanted to make this therapy like accessible to patients. So we offer patients a subscription, different subscriptions options. So we have a monthly subscription, quarterly subscription, or semi-annual subscription. And depending on the plan they pick, typically works out to be about $129 to $149 per month. And there is just a minimum commitment of 3 months. And this is because, again, a conditioning therapy, we usually need that kind of time frame to really see what it can do. And on the semi-annual option, if patient wants to minimize the number of blood draws, I mean, they can get treatment for 6 months. In terms of expiration, so of course that's something that we keep validating, but we have solid data that up to 6 months, it's totally safe to keep the product frozen. And now we're close to getting to the data of a year of the storage. And once we have it, then we'll be able to update that. But at this point, what we can say is 6 months.
So one thing I will say is I just had to change my insurance, my disability insurance, and so I had to do another medical exam. And guess who came? Exam one. They were phenomenal. Okay, so like from a phlebotomy standpoint, I'm glad you're using this service. They were they were wonderful in my experience.
Okay. Very good.
If doctors want to learn more, find a rep, talk to you, Alfonso, what is the best way to reach you or to learn more?
Well, it's very very simple. So they can either go into our website, occubio.com. They can email our operation team, our support team, and the email address is very simple. It's support@occubio.com. So very very simple. And of course, if they want to like reach out to me, discuss anything, they can also contact me directly. And my email address is my first initial, so A, and then my last name, Sabater, @occubio.com. So I'll be happy to also answer any questions or.
Thank you. Well, this wouldn't be a to the point episode if we didn't ask you as our guest what your life lens is. I'm actually very excited to hear what
I
your
am
life lens
too.
is.
I'm like, this guy is incredible. Like, what is his life lens? I want to know.
Well, I had something in mind, but you asked me a question at the beginning, which was like, how do you do with like so many things? And actually, I think this is something that really helped me, which is a simple word, and it's balance. Like it really got to a point in my life that was really complicated with clinics, surgeries, the research team, the companies. Um, I don't know. I felt like everything was urgent all the time, and at some point, I realized that if I didn't like actively protect time for my family, for my friends, to do exercise, for my own spiritual life, I mean, I really needed that time. So if you ask me, and this is something by the way, I tell most of my fellows, which is in life, really you need balance. And yes, you may say, well, yeah, but how do you handle so much work, right? And I think in that sense, is very important. Definitely the prioritization. So accepting that some things are urgent, some things can wait. And number two, teamwork, because sometimes I actually wanted to do everything, um, and then you realize that it's impossible. So really trusting the people around you, counting on people that it's part of your team instead of trying to do everything yourself, that really helps. But I feel that balance is critical in life, and you need to actively protect that.
That is like a great theme. I feel like we are hearing this more and more from people who are, I think, at their core overachievers, which I'm going to say that about you. I don't know if you would accept that statement, but people that do a lot, I think you do kind of get to a point where you're like, I do need to, make my priorities and sort of, make the things that I'm going to compromise on and things that I'm not. And so that's great advice for all of us, for all of us to hear. So thank you so much for spending the evening with us and talking about OcuBio and the qualified autologous serum drops is certainly an exciting thing to talk about and a great way to better treat our patients. So I appreciate you for coming on the podcast.
Thank you, Jackie, and thank you, Jesse, so much for inviting me. It's been really a pleasure. Thank you.